big story that this is what I call the sinister secrecy surrounding the 3 family court judges who made decisions that led to that semi-human monster, Sara Sharif, and his equally monstrous partner getting custody of poor little Sara Sharif. And then, of course, torturing and killing her systematically. The judges who made those bad decisions, those mistakes, are protected by a granting of anonymity by Mr. Justice Williams, who said that to reveal their names, first of all, he said bizarrely, that would be like, if we're going to blame them, that would be like blaming the lookout, the watchman, for the Titanic going down. Now, I wouldn't hold him solely responsible, but he's probably got a few questions to answer. So that was a bizarre analogy, if you ask me. But he went on to say naming them would risk a social media lynch mob, at which point I kind of think, so what? And then he said that some outlets, some media outlets, he didn't speculate, he said, will not report this fairly and accurately. Will not. This is horrific. You know, justice must not only be seen to be done, it must be seen to be done. He is preventing transparency that we require. The justice system, I've never heard before judges being granted anonymity. They must be named. This is a question of a free democracy with freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and they must be named. And Justice Williams, in my mind, should be severely rebuked for what he said. How does he know? You know, just, oh, you know, those papers, you know what they'll do. Who the hell does he think he is?
Well, what he knows is that papers will pretty much go for it because these judges between them made errors of judgment, quite literally errors of judgment, because we all know what ended up happening, and it was utterly, utterly appalling. And so I think that they should be bold enough to stand up to either defend the judgments they made with the information they had available at the time, or hold their hands up and say, well, actually, we got this wrong, demonstrably so, because that poor little girl died. I agree with you about hiding away in the shadows. And I think the media would be brutal, but I think they ought to be lofty enough to cope with that. And that the law doesn't need to protect them in the way that it's clearly doing in this case. I agree with you about that analogy on the Titanic. Funnily enough, by coincidence, I've literally just rewatched the Titanic movie last weekend, having not seen it since it first came out, whenever it was, sort of in the 90s. And the Watchmen actually do hold some responsibility. Certainly in the movie, they're slightly chit-chatting and, you know, faffing around and having a cup of tea as the iceberg hoves into view. Yeah. So that was a useless and rubbish analogy. It really
was. I mean, he's sort of suggesting, I mean, why would you even think of the Watchmen when the Titanic hit the iceberg? Oh, gee, Justice Williams, I don't know. Take a wild guess. Unbelievable. Now, in the this case, one of the reasons that Mr. Justice Williams apparently has reached the conclusion that we must not name these 3 judges, one of whom, by the way, the 3rd judge, this is the main one, in 2019, despite many allegations of abuse by Sara Sharif, Sarah's father, gave custody to Sara Sharif. One of the reasons he did this was because in a written submission, Sara Sharif's lawyers, Sara Sharif is this semi-human monster who systematically tortured his little daughter to death. This was what was given to Mr. Justice Williams. Mr. Sharif is concerned that no harm should come to the judge who presided in the historic proceedings. I mean, well, let me tell you, I don't really give a damn what concerns Mr. Sharif, and nor, I suggest, should Mr. Justice Williams.
Couldn't agree with you more. You know, Mr. Sharif, I'm not even sure why we're calling him Mr. You know, the guy is an absolute animal. There is no word for an individual like that. I think there are wider questions here too about the operations of the family courts, and we all know they are very secretive, the family courts. All sorts of stuff goes on there which we never hear about, and largely rightly so, and that's because it involves children, and children certainly don't need to be dragged into the public eye when their parents are arguing, or when there are cases of abuse and so on. But because of that veil of secrecy, I strongly believe that things that should be in the public domain and have sweeping implications are things that we just don't get to hear about. And probably terrible injustices are done or happen as a result of that lack of scrutiny.
Absolutely. As I say, this is Britain. This is the British justice system. It is a bedrock of our system that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. Transparency in these matters is at the heart of our democracy, at the heart of our free country. And these judges, particularly the one in 2019, who took on board all the allegations of abuse against Irfan Sharif and said, no, 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 I'm going to hand this poor kid to Irfan and his horrible partner, Bainash Batul. That judge in 2019, yes, he's going to get a hard time. Could be a she, I don't know. They're going to get a hard time, but they deserve it. And so do the other two judges. That's the way it goes. If you don't like that, don't be a judge. Simple as that. This is ridiculous.
Well, in almost any other walk of life, if you hold a very senior taxpayer-funded role and you massively screw up, or you make a judgment that has terrible consequences, you wouldn't expect to be able to hide away from that. You would expect the media to come after you, and rightly so. That's why our country isn't even worse than it currently is.
Yeah, so many judges do seem to despise the freedom of the press. That was what came across to me in this case. This is a judge going, oh, those awful journalists, you know, they're going to give me and my mates on the judiciary a hard time. Yeah, well, suck it up as far as I'm concerned. This is about justice for that kid. This is about justice for poor little Sara, who was let down by the system, tragically. And if we don't know who made the mistakes, we're likely to make them again, aren't we? So let's name those judges. Good luck to The Sun and all the other media outlets who are currently appealing this appalling decision by Mr. Justice Williams. I think and I hope they succeed.